Hello, friends. Can you hear me? Show me thumbs up. If you can hear me, wonderful. Great to see everyone here with us today. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Roman from the Paititi Institute. And we are working with the indigenous cultures from the Amazon and the Andes. I've been involved with these cultures for the past 2 decades. And also we work with intercultural bridges, as well as the Himalayan cultures and other traditions from around the world, essentially all related to our own direct experience of life. And so for me personally, working with these traditions has been really about that. How can I make it effective and practical in everyday life circumstances today? How those traditions can actually be useful and not just remain as a museum exponents. And in that way, we can continue honoring these traditions. As my friends in the Kero nation share, that these ancient traditions, they are specifically to allow the human spirit to shine in the face of adversity. And that's one of the challenges that they're finding in today's world, is not many people are willing to face the adversity in life today. The life becomes nowadays more and more about convenience and consumerism, and how to zone out and not face the issues. And our whole entertainment industry and drug industry and many other industries are based on that. And so for the indigenous people, the purpose is actually to face the adversity and to discover the human potential in that process. Now, this is something that is also present within each of our lives. And this is that fundamental drive, the dedication to something that is so intimate to each one of us, that has been present with us since early childhood. And how can we actually become, right? It's a journey of becoming. And for the indigenous people, as well as many ancient cultures in the world, there have been specific rites of passages for becoming that in today's world, they have become obsolete in a way, where this specific passage from being childish to becoming a responsible individual is very watered down nowadays. And then we get a lot of adults that are still in the infantile mentality, looking for attention, looking for some kind of instant gratification, and trying to earn love in a way through all kinds of different activities in everyday life that may not be directly related to our innermost well-being. And so a lot in these ancient traditions has to do with this journey of self-parenting, training oneself to actually cultivate that connection with love, with attention, with whatever it is that brings us restfulness, safety, well-being on the most fundamental level. And so then how to not depend on outer appearances, circumstances, and conditions, and then actually engage with life not from a place of need, but from a place of inspiration. And so we all have this drive towards inspiration, towards this essential spark in ancient traditions, of course, in the indigenous traditions, but also something that transpersonal psychology has been discovering from its founder, Carl Jung, and through many people afterwards, including Joseph Campbell, how studying many ancient cultures and traditions around the world and seeing how there is this journey. It's been titled as a hero's journey, or it's been referred to as this rite of passage into one's highest potential. But essentially, within all ancient cultures and traditions, there is a reference to this purpose of life, and in ancient times, the purpose of life was not a philosophical concept, but a certain state of aliveness that we can experience. And then, of course, we can connect it to a certain purpose on a conceptual level. But first and foremost, it's this state of aliveness. It's this truth for the indigenous people as a state of being. And it has to do with the spark within each one of us. So, of course, it may initially be just a curiosity that we have in our lives, a certain dream or wondering. And then it becomes gradually a real possibility. How to honor that spark, how not to sacrifice one's soul in order to survive in this appearance of separation, the world that we live in. And then, of course, we can see how the society is using that spark, including the entertainment industry, this hero's journey that all ancient cultures work with. And today it's an opportunity to actually avoid one's own journey by vicariously living a journey of someone else. And so it can simultaneously help, and it can also prevent the journey of oneself to be taking place. And so we can all relate to certain movies or books that we have read through our lives that have been really inspiring. We've really identified with the hero in the book or in the movie. And essentially, the hero's journey is represented through everything that we are so excited about. The Avatar movie that just came out, or the Everything Everywhere All at Once, or Alice in Wonderland. So many different literary works, they reflect this inner journey. They reflect this reconciliation of inner conflicts. And I personally resonate a lot with the reluctant hero archetype. And we can see that also in the different movies and books. Essentially, it's someone who is not specifically wanting to be a hero or is trying to be a hero, but under extreme circumstances, there is this pressure cooker scenario where the hero has to make certain meaningful decisions in life. And then under immense pressure, then discovering one's own highest potential. And the hero's journey that is present within each of our lives, it's not necessarily something grandeur or this apocalyptic and world-ending scenario, but more than anything, the mundane, I find, is the most challenging. It's easy to act like a hero in a way when everything is really intense around and the world is falling apart, but it's really in the most mundane scenarios of our lives how to maintain that perspective of maybe boredom or lack of meaning or purpose. They become the purpose. The obstacle is the way. Starting to see those mundane circumstances as maybe dragons in our lives that we are reconciling, and learning how to harness this essentially energy of life that is uncontainable, that cannot be stopped, cannot be blocked, yet it can be harnessed. It can be channeled in a way that can be more meaningful. And so within these traditions, that's actually the main medicine, is the recognition of a purpose in one's life that is more meaningful and greater than one's own immediate mundane circumstances. And how throughout our lives, it's not just something random that is happening, but there is a meaningful journey. And it is the inner journey, even though on the outside there may be separate circumstances, appearances, situations, and it may seem totally random, and yet there is a continuity on the innermost level. And so the course is patterning the ancestral wisdom traditions, the living wisdom traditions. So it's not just something that is done conceptually, and it is not just going through some kind of rituals that are very exotic, but you don't understand what they are about, and then needing to fantasize. But on the most practical level, this has to do with your own lives. So throughout human history, throughout thousands of years, people mapped the journey of maturation of human consciousness, coming into the full fruition of that potential, and then recognizing how it is playing out in all of our lives, whether we are aware of it or not. It may play out through our dreams, it may play out through certain external situations that are unforeseen, different problems in our lives, issues that are happening, things that are out of our control, that are putting us under that reluctant hero pressure cooker scenario. And so then to recognize that is the most essential practice in these traditions, to not lose perspective, to not lose heart in the difficult situations. It's easy to be loving when everything is very nice around us, but actually it's when things are not working out the way that we would like them to. And so to maintain that heart-centered presence, which also is something that in these ancient traditions is not something that is seen as this fluffy kind of love and just to feel special about oneself, but actually love is approached in a very practical way in ancient traditions. So without love, it's very hard, if not impossible, to maintain objective perspective in life. When there are a lot of emotions that are coursing through one's being and being triggered, upset, charged, irritated, confused, lost, it's hard to see objectively what is happening. Emotions tend to take over. And so the heart in these traditions is recognized as the master of emotions, not getting lost in them. It's possible to experience them to even greater degrees. It's not about becoming numb, but to fully experience everything without getting lost in it. And so the heart-centered presence, as it's cultivated, then allows for objective insight into one's predicaments in life. And in that way, it's very essential. And of course, it's something that is cultivated through a natural state of being. This essential state that I mentioned as we started speaking, it has to do with a state of being that we start to experience when we go into nature without much effort. If we just allow ourselves to maybe put away the commotion of everyday life, the cell phones, the social media, then gradually we start to come to our senses. We start to experience the inner silence, this meditative state that is not something very formal or fancy. It's something that children naturally experience when they're playing outside in nature, for example. It's this natural food. My kids, we sometimes call them to eat, and they are so engaged in playing, they feel nourished by it. They feel nourished just in this open, curious state of wonder. And it's very connected to the heart-centered presence. And so sometimes people say, oh, meditation is not for me, and I cannot do it, and it's too hard, and my mind never stops. And actually, that's how it is for everyone. And the people who are experienced meditators, they know more than beginners sometimes, because they've experienced that struggle for such a long time. And then, of course, just learning how to be with oneself, with that monkey mind, and seeing how naturally it starts to calm down when there is openness towards the experience. So that's something that we begin to experience and honor in ourselves. In our mainstream society today, we are grown to be useful society members and to honor the outside more than the inside. I have to run in this hamster wheel, and I have to do all kinds of things that come from survival, pleasure, or self-attainment, and yet to just be, to honor being, is something that is often lacking in today's world. And if there is being, then there has to be some kind of an agenda behind it. So in these ancient traditions, the being doesn't come with a certain membership that you have to pay for. The being is something that is honored on the innermost level as a first and foremost priority, and then learning how to bring that being in everyday's life. And the being, of course, it's the unconditional being. I can be my own worst enemy, and then I can also learn to be my own best friend. And it's a process, right? It's not something that takes place very easily, because there are all kinds of tendencies that have been developed that honor the outside, for example, more than the inside, honoring the outside opinion more than self-acceptance, for example. And so the first step is to honor the being and to recognize that it is something that is possible. It's this tender, vulnerable, honest, sincere being with oneself, with all the good, bad, and ugly, right? That is the foundation of these traditions. We can do all kinds of exotic and fancy practices, but without honoring oneself and one's life and one's heroic journey, then these traditions are meaningless. And of course, in the hero's journey in these traditions, also it's not necessarily something romantic, but it's a journey that may sometimes seem impossible, because in a way it's to come back into an original, unconditional, open, loving state. And it has to do often with the wounded innocence in our modern society, where that state is not honored in society that is based on dog-eat-dog competitive principles. And then it's the truth of who each one of us is at the same time. And it's contradicting the norm of society. It's wounded innocence because it's often not okay to be naive, to be helpless, to not know in today's world. If I'm innocent, it means someone can take advantage of me. So I'm gonna put a front. I'm gonna learn how to wear a mask, a persona, a personality construct, the whole purpose of which is to protect this tender, innocent, vulnerable child that is present within each one of us and often does not know how to act in the world, needs to hide behind a certain appearance. And then it's protected sometimes to such a degree that what initially was a fortress from the outside world becomes one's own jail. And so it is also this fundamental drive towards freedom that we all have since we are born into this world. When I witnessed my two kids being born and gradually learn the most basic functions of life, there is this, it's not something that has to be forced. There is this spark of freedom that we are all born with, completely helpless, and yet from the very beginning wanted to do everything by oneself. And there is, of course, a balance. Yeah, I can do certain things by myself, but I can also learn from others who have done that journey before me, who can share maybe not the specific steps, because for each one of us, we have unique circumstances, but the qualities of being that allow us to face the adversity is something that we can learn from each other and from the lineages of people who have been dedicating towards that. And then with that, of course, my younger son, he actually developed a lot faster than my older one, because he had already a trailblazer to watch as a role model. And of course, he learns both the good and the bad, but he learned to speak a few months earlier. He learned to walk a few months. So if my older one learned to walk at 1 year and 2 months, the younger one learned to walk at 9 months. And it's because he was watching. There was a bridge for him, right? There's a path that you need to learn how to walk, and then you can actually watch someone who has just who's just a little bit farther along than you on the path, and then someone who is a little bit more farther along. And that's how these ancient indigenous lineages have been developing over generations. They've been passed from one life individual to the next one as something that is possible. So the first step is to just recognize that it is possible and others have done it before. It's this fundamental seed of well-being that maybe is covered by this hard protective shell because it hasn't found the nurturing environment to be planted in. And one's whole life, I've been wandering and being blown by the wind left and right with this seed of innocence that is covered by the hard shell, and then coming to fertile ground, coming to the perspective of the ancestors, the lineages that are beyond dogma, that can show on an experiential level what is possible. And it's not just the psychoactive plant medicines that are present in the Amazon and the Andes. Actually, that's not the central element of these traditions. But the central element is this continuous cultivation of mastery of love. That's how the indigenous people relate to it. How to maintain that essential state of being in the face of greater and greater adversity in one's life. And so the first step is just to recognize that seed. And then there are practices that help us in that recognition. And so there are practices that work with the breath in these traditions, but the first and foremost step, even before breath, is beginner's mind, to empty one's cup, to release all the stale concepts and ideas that prevent the heart from opening. And that is the state of purification. And yes, the sacred plant medicines can also help purify, but without one's willingness to, what do we really purify? To recognize, what are we purifying? And in these traditions, yeah, there are physical toxins and mental toxins, emotional toxins, but all those toxins, they have to do with resistance to life. The process of remembering that original state, the original seed. And that's actually how it's referred to in these traditions as the journey of remembrance. The hero's journey also has to do with that. And this remembrance is the remembrance of oneself as a channel of life. Now, again, if we really start asking the essential question, what does that mean to be a channel of life? And in these traditions, not only in this, in many ancient traditions, there is a reference to the state of interconnectedness, a state of no separation, where I end and the world begins is a very fine line. Where the world ends and I begin is a very fine line. And so it's the state of interconnectedness that also has to do with something that we've all experienced. Otherwise, these traditions wouldn't exist. If it didn't connect directly to our own experience, then it would be meaningless. It's not someone else's truth, it's this reaffirmation of the innermost truth within oneself. And so the remembrance journey in many cultures around the world has to do with this state of a fetus inside the mother's womb, where the consciousness of the mother and the consciousness of the child are inseparable from one another, where the child experiences complete safety, nurture, and unconditional love, whatever they may be going through, which can be also quite difficult in the mother's womb as well. It doesn't mean that the child just experiences comfort and pleasure. There are growing pains, literally needing to grow new limbs can be quite painful. The threshold of pain in children is much higher than adults. It's been proven through scientific studies. And actually, it's because the children are still very much connected to unconditional motherly love. As adults, we become more disconnected, and then we break down with much lesser pain than the children can actually bear in their lives. And it's because of this lack of trust, forgetfulness, that we're capable of tapping into that unconditional love that we once experienced in the mother's womb. And so then to remember that it's possible, to remember that initially, of course, we are born into the world as consumers. We are not so conscious, and then we need those external reference points, such as the motherly love, the fatherly consciousness, how the indigenous traditions relate to it. The mind is the masculine, the heart is the feminine, and then there is the union and the learning curve between the two that allows us to express ourselves. And how those forces ultimately, they are within our own organism, even on the level of chromosomes, X and Y. And in these traditions, then learning how to bring that divine union within oneself, first we experience it through all of the appearances around us. The mountains that you see behind me, for the Queros, the First Nation here in the Andes, they represent a certain quality of the masculine. The earth, the Pachamama, represents a quality of the feminine. And there are many of those qualities. The water is one aspect of the feminine. The earth is another. The moon is another. There are many, many qualities of the masculine and feminine that we see in our outside world through people, animals, circumstances, physical landscapes. And it is all pointing us to the recognition of that within ourselves. And so then gradually starting to honor those qualities more and more within ourselves, starting to recognize that nature is who we are. And that is the remembrance. How can I bring the mind to abide in the heart, that divine union? How can I see life objectively and not let my unresolved past issues continue to haunt me through every relationship that I meet, different working situations, different unsuccessful endeavors in life? So starting to recognize how nature communicates to us in patterns, and patterns reflect energy. And energy is what connects the inside and the outside. So the first step is the remembrance, is this beginner's mind that has to do with self-honesty and the ability to let go of baggage, not just go on cruise control, this automatic robot behavior, continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. And then being unsuccessful and thinking, oh, I should just try harder doing the same thing. And then wasting a lot of time in life sometimes, because I'm too embarrassed to admit that I haven't been doing it in the most meaningful way possible. And of course, unconditional love cannot be forced. the awakening of one's highest potential has to come naturally. Just like apple falls from a tree when it's ready. It doesn't have to be forced. And of course, we can nurture the soil of the tree. We can put water in a garden, but we cannot force nature. And the same thing in this process, to get to know oneself, to till the soil of our inner mud, right? To really go into the mud, the shadow of our life, a lot has to do with that. Seeing how if there is no mud, then there is no lotus. And so the hero's journey, the rites of passage in these traditions, they are not something pleasant necessarily, because it is kind of this experience of the chick hatching out of an egg. Feels very clumsy and uncomfortable. Maybe I'm not happy in my life, but at least I'm comfortable in my misery. And it's already set in routine. And then to come out of that, yeah, freedom is much more spacious, but it's definitely not comfortable. And again, the first step is to start to see how there are these very ingrained habits, neural pathways that have been developed through life of just doing the same thing over and over again, and expecting a different result and blaming everything and everyone that when it's not happening the way we want to. And instead recognizing meaning in everything that is happening, recognizing the communication of a higher intelligence through all of the adversities and the ups and downs of our lives. All of the blessings and curses, they no longer become something random. And then they no longer become blessings and curses. They become meaningful steps if I cannot open the space and purify a certain resistance to life. I cannot see the good things coming in a way. So those are essential reflections that we can work with. And the state of interconnectedness, right? This state of openness can also only come when we face our shadows. I cannot relate to the challenges of others if I haven't opened my heart to my own challenges, if I blame and judge myself, beat myself up, or blame other circumstances for it. Then every time that someone else will reflect a similar challenge that I haven't been able to deal with in my own life, my covers will get blown. I would like to pretend that everything is fine. And I meet someone who is clearly showing me that I've never learned to deal with that. And I get upset with them instead of relating. And so without relating to one's own challenges, it's not very possible to relate with others. And then without learning to relate with others, also it's not possible to rejoice in the happiness of others. And then instead of being jealous or envious about the happiness that someone has worked their life, their whole life maybe for, then actually being happy, how amazing that is that there are people who are much happier than I am, and I can learn from them. So relatedness is very essential in these traditions, and it has to do with this channel, awakening oneself as a channel of love. And the channel, what am I really channeling? In these traditions, it's not some mystical energy and I have to fantasize about it once again, but it's something that is very prevalent in one's life. Channeling every moment. How am I open to each moment that is happening in my life? Yeah, some moments I enjoy and I can be very open and very nice and easy. And some moments I'd rather go and hide in a corner somewhere and do something to forget all about it. and I cannot deal with it, and I get all tensed up and all worked up, and then it takes me a long time to unwind myself afterwards. And so then starting to see also those patterns in life. Maybe something happened, someone stepped on my toes, someone said something to me, and then I get triggered. It's not really that person that is at fault. They just showed me a certain energy that I've never learned to deal with. This frustration or anger or irritation. Or maybe I've been bottling something up for a long time, and then the tiniest little thing just turns the switch and everything blows up. And so then starting to see, how am I channeling this emotional energy, the psychic energy in my life? How am I riding the waves of feelings and emotions through everyday life circumstances? How can I be more rooted in Pachamama, according to these traditions, that is a symbol of unconditional love? It's the center of gravity. We're always gravitating towards it, and if we can see the real meaning of this nurturing ground that we can always rely on, then that can help us throughout everyday life circumstances. Then the light of consciousness that continues to illuminate deeper and deeper states of openness, of being, of rootedness, without being carried away or throwing the towel in the face of difficult circumstances of our lives. So this is something that has to do with just planting the seed in these traditions. And so we find the community of friends on the way that also are willing to face themselves and not continue to run away. The intentional community, because the whole world is the unintentional one. And so the intentional one is people who are willing to be honest, to be open, to face themselves, and to help each other from a place of love. You know, I would rather have friends that tell me the bitter truth and then also apply that to themselves, of course, like one finger pointing out and three fingers pointing in. Then friends who are just telling me sweet lies about everything that is good in my life, because then there is no growth and evolution. And so this is just planting the seed. And then through that planting of the seed, starting to recognize the essential human qualities that nurture the seed, that allow the seed to let go of the hard shell and sprout. That is the first step within these traditions. Then through that sprouting of the seed, both the roots going down and the stem going up, the hero's journey really begins at that point. At first, to recognize that it's possible. It's possible to plant this innocence that never found a place in the outside world, to honor it, to no longer be a victim within this innocence, but to empower the innocence to become fearless love, to become the power of compassion when the innocence is empowered. And so that's something that you can reflect on in that step of the process. And of course, we will be working with that in our course together. And then the second step, through that planting of the seed, tapping into the ecosystem, the interconnectedness, starting to relate our own inner process through our own unique circumstances to the universal blueprint of consciousness transformation that is universal across different cultures and traditions. So that's the second step of that process. And then we learn the reciprocity, the right relations, and also the recognition of how different archetypes, different archetypal energies, those essential human qualities that empower the innocence, are present through all the people in our lives. There is this reflection, the mirror-like wisdom of the universe that is starting to show up more and more. And then in that way, we start to see the wisdom all the people that ever showed up in our lives, all of our friends and enemies, they were all meaningful messengers of the higher intelligence, of our own being. And then we start to understand that language more and more. And through the understanding, we are able to cultivate a loving relationship with the intensity of our lives. We trust. If there's one thing that I can trust in my life, really, if I can focus on one thing in my life that I can trust, is that there is always something to learn. In each moment, nothing is random. And there is always a deeper lesson of love to be cultivated. I'm not able to see it in the moment, but I can always recognize it looking back. And because of that, I can trust in that if I go through something and everything is crumbling, falling apart, exploding left and right, and I'm totally overcome with issues, and in that moment, even though I cannot see the resolution, I cannot see the lesson, but because I have learned to see it in the past, I can trust that there is always something for me to learn, even if I don't see it in the moment. And that in itself is already huge. It's been a huge turning point in my life in that way. And so then through the interconnectedness, we start to see the complementary opposites beyond right and wrong. In these traditions also, there is no right and wrong. There is ignorance and wisdom, and one is an essential step for the other. They're complementary opposites. The awareness of ignorance is the seed of wisdom. Where in this world of duality that the mainstream world is today based on, then it's more about bad and good. Bad can never become good. Wrong can never become right. Here, it's not possible to live one's life without mistakes. And if it would be possible, then that kind of life would not be worth living. And so to really honor the falling down, the defeats in one's life, if I don't learn how to fall gracefully, I'll never learn how to walk. And so that is very essential in these traditions, to go beyond right and wrong, to see that through the interconnectedness, I can never become old and wise if I don't learn how to be young and stupid first. Then I'll just become old and stupid. So that's not really so meaningful. And so to really honor the mistakes in one's life, to honor the falling down, getting lost, losing one's way in order to really find oneself. That is also very essential, that we discover through the planting of the seed and then sprouting the relatedness, discovering the greater ecosystem, finding that supportive community that allows us to join our intention with. If I am just on my own against the world that is very unintentional, it will be very hard, if at all possible. But then starting to see, I can help you by doing my own work. You can help me by doing your own work on yourself. And that is the most empowering, when we are able to witness that in each other. That is the sense of community. It's not like, okay, here's all of my issues, you deal with them. No, it's when we each become empowered, we empower each other, and that is also the power of interconnectedness, and how we learn to recognize the language of life, that we can all share our unique part, our unique piece of the puzzle into. And then, of course, through that sharing, through that engagement and coming together, starting to heal through each other, relating to each other, seeing how actually this journey, everyone are on this heroic journey, whether they know it or not. And people who are maybe living a totally unconscious life, to my subjective perspective. They're learning their own lessons, and they're cultivating those essential qualities. And they maybe are having an even more challenging journey than us here, when we can tap into the wisdom of many generations. And so then to honor everyone through that, to see that that is something that we can relate to each other through. And then also see how everyone who are my friend in my life, who are inspiring to me, they are a good role model for qualities that I can keep developing. They're showing me what is possible. And then people who are maybe I consider my enemies, or people who challenge me or disturb me, they actually allow me to put it to practice what I have learned. And without the two, it's not possible. If there is no challenges, there is no evolution. One of my indigenous elders in the Amazon, from the Yagua tribe, he shared with me once that excessive comfort makes us weak. And then, of course, if our modern society is all about comfort, then there's nothing to challenge us, and then there is no evolution, there's no ingenuity. Right? I love it here in the Andes, in the local culture. Things last for ages. People just keep fixing it and fixing it and fixing it. In first world countries, in developed world, people just throw everything out. Something little breaks down, they throw it out on the street, they get something new. Here they have those masters on the street. They just have a little hole in the wall and they can repair anything for you. Things that in maybe the Microsoft or things, they throw them away. Here they will actually make it work. And that requires a lot of ingenuity, because people here are more challenged. You know, what is it? There is the saying that necessity is the mother of ingenuity, or the mother of invention. Necessity is the mother of invention. And so, of course, it's very essential to challenge ourselves. Even if on the outside level, everything is provided for us and we are supported, and for the sake of evolution itself, it's good to challenge ourselves, to find healthy challenges in our lives. And so then that brings us into the third pillar of the indigenous wisdom traditions that we are working with here, and that is the dream work. And the dream work, it has to do with this language of nature, the language of being, the language of interconnectedness. And it is a meaningful language, right? We are learning the alphabet, but essentially this language shows us the hero's journey and the mastery of love, the steps that we can undertake and through which we are guided through seemingly unconnected circumstances. And so through these three pillars of ancestral wisdom, the seed of innocence, the remembrance of it, and then honoring that, learning how to cultivate it, making it into a practice, and seeing what qualities are necessary to sustain that open state in our lives, to not lose it. And so then we start to cultivate those qualities, and we cultivate those qualities in relation to others in our lives, our friends and people who challenge us. Then as we are cultivating these qualities, we are starting to see that there is a step-by-step process, an inner step-by-step process. And that brings us into the deeper meaning, the wisdom of our organism, the wisdom of being, the language of symbols, metaphors. And that is also the power of our inner legend, the recognition and honoring of that basic spark of curiosity, the spark of aliveness in our lives, and then turning it into a genuine flame of incentive. And so here we will be working with also embodying those qualities, learning how to recognize them, and starting to root ourselves into the greater ecosystem, not just to receive the nourishment, but also to share the nourishment. And the dream work is a very essential step in that sense. So that is the general overview. And of course, the practices that we'll be supporting ourselves through. In the first step, we will start with the basic remembrance technique and the practice, and people who have been checking our online evolutionary blueprint course, they can see the practice there, and we will be working with the remembrance practice on the most basic level. And that is the anchor of well-being, to just bring ourselves into that state and use essential bookmarks from our own life experience to keep bringing the focus into that essential natural state of being. For the indigenous people, it has to do with awareness. And the awareness is not localized in the brain. The brain has a certain way to engage with awareness. But awareness for the indigenous people is something that is present on the level of our entire body. And so, in that way, the awareness has to do with many experiences, sensations, emotions, feelings, and the subtle energies of our lives that precede the emotions, that precede the thoughts. Sorry, not the emotions, but the thoughts. The sensations may precede the emotions. And so then gradually starting to get to know oneself. Right? Essentially, that's what it's for. If you're interested to get to know yourself, you've come to the right place. And of course, that is the foundation. And so then we start to work with that. As we get to know ourselves, as we start to root ourselves in that anchor, that seed of well-being, then it becomes more and more clear when you lose it in everyday life circumstances. And then you can start to observe, to bring your awareness into the noticing of those patterns. So that is the first step. And in the second step, and we'll also start to engage with Qigong in the first step, and also the Indian art of being. They're very parallel practices, very similar movements, and have to do with the unifying the energies between the polar opposites of our lives. And that will gradually bring us into the shadow work and learning how to be anchored in the heart, in the eye of the storm, through all of the life's relentless storms and changes of weather. So, and of course, as we start to honor that more and more, when we see that it is not something that comes from the outside, it's not like there's some guy on the outside that is telling you to do something, but it's through your own recognition of honoring your own essence, your own being. We all come into this world naked and we all go naked. The only thing that we can take with us is our attitude. Let's make it a good attitude. That's what these traditions are focusing on. And so then we will engage with the an Amazonian Yanomami-based breath work, the primordial breath work, to recognize and experience the interconnectedness through our connected intention, and also be learning how to cultivate a loving relationship with the intensity of life. We'll be doing different practices of breath work, meditation, and relating to the hero's journey. Will then be bringing more deeper facets of remembrance. For those of you who had a chance in our evolutionary blueprint course online to look at the fairy tale, it's my pride and joy. I worked for quite a few years to develop it, and you'll see that the remembrance practice that is present through the fairy tale, it's a little PDF download. I don't know if people have seen it. Maybe it's a little bit hidden, but you can find it, and we'll also share it with this course. And there are many, many deeper aspects of the remembrance practice. So first we focus just on the anchor, then we start to focus on the different patterns of our lives, the qualities behind them, the challenges, the difficulties, the essential human qualities. So there are many facets within the remembrance practice that we will be weaving throughout our course, and of course our group reflections, and we'll be splitting ourselves into groups if there are more than just one or two or three people. And so we will start seeing how on a practical level, first, I can see this seed of innocence more separated from everyday life circumstances. Then I start to slowly connect it with the everyday life circumstances until it blends in completely. You don't have to go and live in the Amazon rainforest for the rest of your life. You can continue engaging in your everyday existence but see the spiritual process, the inner journey of awakening your potential to be in the foreground, to have the primary attention in your life, and then it overlays everything else that you're doing. Everything becomes a training ground for your inner qualities to awaken, for your inspiration, creativity, passion of life. Continue being nourished, and then connect to compassion. How to transform the passion into compassion. The poisons in our lives, all of the problems, into the medicine that keeps evolution nourished. The mud that becomes the fertile soil for the lotus. And so then we'll also be engaging in some aspects of the dream work. Of course, we will be sharing some material, and if you haven't engaged in the dream work with us before, then very much encourage you to do so beforehand. And then we will be engaging with facets of the dream work that relate to the particular motifs that come through our collective journey. So that's a little overview of the what are you waiting for course, because what are we waiting for? What am I waiting for? I'm waiting for a little bit more clarity to make the next baby step in my life. And I often find that good things come to those who wait. To wait meaningfully, not just to wait kind of this checking out, this kind of state, but to wait with full awareness, to know what you're waiting for, to see how the different energies in your life can be gestating and maturing for the next step of your life to take. And so the more that you can be clairvoyant in your life, the more that you can clearly see the energies, the circumstances that encourage those energies, the more that you can actually manifest your full potential in the outer circumstances. I'm a really bad salesman, but if you really wish to face yourself and find what you're capable of and what you're made of, then this is what we will be working with, and I'll be sharing my own spark and my own passion on this path for the last 20 years. And then together with all of our lives, of course, unconsciously, I've been doing it for 45 years, but consciously a little bit more than 20, maybe 25. So then each one of us also have our own process, conscious and unconscious. And then that's what makes this journey so rich and so meaningful, so healing and revitalizing. So then we'll keep nourishing the flame of our genuine incentive, our collective, what do you call it, bonfire. And so that's about it. And if you have some questions or comments, now is the time, friends. Thank you for your attention span so far. Okay, so I see Mindaugas here. So again, you can raise your virtual hand, or you can type that you wish to speak in the side comment bar, or raise your physical hand and I'll see you then. Okay, Mindaugas, great to have you with us.
Thank you. For some reason, I can't switch my video on.
Oh, really?
But it's, yeah.
Right. Let me see. Hold on a second. Can you do it now?
Let me see. Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
There we go. Thank you. So I have a few questions. One practical one. Because you are starting the course, the 2-day course at 12 p.m. Peru time, and it's gonna go for pretty much a whole day. The question is does it make sense to attend it if we don't participate for the whole duration, because it's going to be quite late by the end the day finishes, like where I am. I'm not sure if I'm going to have the capacity.
Well,
That's a
we
person.
will be recording each session and sharing it with people, because sometimes people might miss a session. Of course, we encourage to be present as much as possible, but yeah, since you're on the other side of the world, definitely. And also, since you've worked with us before, you have engaged in those foundational pillars of wisdom, then that can also be helpful, where it's not going to be something that you haven't covered before. We'll go into different aspects or nuances of this knowledge, and it continues to deepen. But since you have already done that, then that makes sense. And then, of course, it's not going to be throughout the whole day. We'll have practices, right? So we'll have 2-hour sessions, then people have time for lunch and their own personal process, and then we'll meet again for another 2 hours, and then we'll meet again. I think it's 3 sessions, 2-hour each, that we'll be engaging with.
Okay, cool, thank you. The other thing that I wanted to clarify, I've heard that there's a dream dictionary somewhere. I wondered if that dream dictionary is in Sutra, where you explain different archetypes.
Yeah.
Is that the dream dictionary, or there's the separate, more in-depth?
We have a basic archetypal alphabet. I wouldn't call it a dictionary.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many dream dictionaries out there. But in these traditions, it cannot be a dictionary, because it will be always based on specific circumstances. And so there are specific alphabet letters to the archetypes, like I mentioned today, the mother archetype, the father archetype, the reluctant hero archetype. But then they will manifest differently based on different circumstances. And so we do have on the online blueprint course those archetypal alphabet descriptions, and then there's also the talk that describes. There's a video recording of going more in depth about the alphabet, and then also the application of it on a blueprint. And we've chosen an evolutionary fairy tale, and then we also have a little booklet that goes along with the video talk that I mentioned, that has to do with the different remembrance practices and how they go into different depths throughout the hero's journey. So yeah, so that's something that you can definitely find there. And we'll also share a little booklet for the course. I'm working out the final details on a little dream work booklet that can also be useful, and that describes the alphabet.
Sweet, cool. Thank you for clarifying that. Final question. This is to maybe satisfy my curiosity, but you mentioned that in the beginning of this call that children's pain threshold is higher than adults. I would really like to see the study who humanly tested pain threshold in children. So if you could provide that, that would be great.
Well, actually, the most known studies done on the subject have to do with the teeth. You know, when the what do you call it, milk teeth, they start to grow in children. The pain threshold is much higher than adults can bear. So there are a lot of studies that point to that as one of the examples. So you can, because the teeth literally, they have to push through the gum, they have to cut through the gum, and so the pain gets to be so high that children develop fever symptoms as it happens. And at the same time, you know, adults would not be able to bear it, according to modern studies, without anesthetics, and children bear it just fine. of course they scream through it, but there are studies that point specifically to that, and then there are many others. But those ones you can start with, and you'll find a lot.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mindaugas.
That's everything.
Great
Thank
seeing
you.
you.
Nice to see you too.
All right. So let's see. So Vanita is asking primordial breathwork practices and tribal synchronizations. We will discuss the cyclical rhythms in our course together. Today was just an overview, but of course we're just dipping our toes in the water, so there's a lot more in relation to that. But yeah, it does work with harmonizing the rhythms of our lives, going into rhythm. You see, like the dog that just passed through. Maya, come, Maya. She's our neighbor's dog. She's super sweet. So there are cyclical, coming to recognize that our body is nature, that we are a bridge between animal and God, and if we cannot honor the animal in ourselves, we can never reach God, right? So it's important to connect with all of the aspects of our being, with the physical and the physiological functions in our lives. And so the breath work helps us to tune in into that and find a different rhythm for each energy center, and then work with the particular sensation, quality, and the feeling that is found within each center. So we'll work more with that in our course. Dates, time. Ooh, I'm really bad with those things. It's usually my wife and our team that help with that. So give me 1 second, and our friend Kaylee will give me that information. Another question from Vanita. Dream work. Currently working with Mother, the Alchemist. Wonderful. Yeah, we'll be engaging, of course, with all of the essential qualities, and then the specific forms in our lives that remind us of them, such as the Mother or the hero, the alchemist. It's the same quality, the hero on a journey that is connecting the dots and is transforming the energies. So that's very wonderful. Okay, so here Mindaugas shared the times in the text, so you guys can take a look at that. Thank you, Mindaugas. And yeah, so again, it's good to reflect and see that why you're engaging, what inspires you, what are the passions in your life. Get real with yourself, right? Sometimes maybe my passion is I want to get some kind of a thing, but that thing in itself represents a certain state of being to me. And then, of course, if that thing breaks, then the state of being breaks. So instead, then see what it represents, how the appearance can guide you to the essence. So what are you passionate about? What are you inspired by? Why you're inspired by it? And then, of course, what prevents you from that? Or what you think that prevents you from that? What are the challenges? What you wish to experience as being in your life? Right, on that innermost level. And then also reflect on the most basic symbols in your life. The most basic symbol that we have in our lives is pain. What does pain represent to you? Is the pain representing to you that you're inadequate, that something is wrong, that you're a faulty product, that you are somehow weak, or maybe you're not good enough? Or is the pain representing the potential of love to come through? Or the pain may represent the ability to learn essential human qualities, or to become vulnerable, to learn to relate with others, right? So it's good to relate to some of those most basic. And then, of course, also what well-being represents to you, what happiness represents, what peaceful being represents to you. What does that mean in your own particular life circumstances? So it's good to reflect if you decide to join the course. it's good to reflect on those essential aspects of our lives. And then, yeah, what are your dreams in your life? The world is telling us to follow our dreams, and these ancient traditions are telling us to wake up, because the reality is so much greater than any dream that we can ever have, if we just learn to see it. And so then how we can use our dreams to wake up to our highest potential, to no longer be daydreaming, but to bring it in the most practical way, how to connect our, dreams in the cloud to rootedness in everyday life. So essentially the course is focusing on that. What are you waiting for, right? And then how can you make it meaningful, not to just be a balloon that goes up really high and explodes. So yeah, that's the essential reflection. Robin, who is going to join us in the course, she couldn't come today. She's doing a first responder. She's like a really amazing, active, outside person, and she's doing a first responder course today and couldn't join us, but she'll definitely be with us in the course, and so she'll add some of that kind of action figure momentum for us to go for it. So yeah, thank you friends for joining in, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Be well, much love. And also you're welcome to send us some reflections questions to our email. Okay, be well, take care of yourself and each other, and see you soon.